Welcome to EcoFun's video on the basis of ethics, corporate social responsibility, and sustainability. The term ethics refers to accepted principles of right or wrong that govern the conduct of a person, the members of a profession, or the action of an organization. Business ethics are the accepted principles of right or wrong governing the conduct of a business people. Ethical decisions are those that are in accordance with those accepted principles of right and wrong, whereas an ethical decision is one that violates the accepted principle. This may sound simple, but in fact, managers may face ethical dilemmas, which are situations where there is no agreement over exactly what the accepted principles of right and wrong are, or where none of the available alternatives seems ethically acceptable. Ethical strategy is a strategy or course of action that does not violate these accepted principles. The most common ethical issues in international business involve employment practices, human rights, environmental regulation, and corruption. First, we're going to talk about employment practices. When work conditions in a host nation are clearly inferior to those in a multinational home nation, which standards should be applied? Those of home nation, those of the host nation, or something between? While fields suggest that pay and work conditions should be the same across nation, but how much divergence is acceptable? Take Nike case as an example. A while back, Nike was in the center of a storm of protests when new reports revealed that working conditions at many of its subcontractors were poor. A report painted a picture of young women who work with toxic materials 6 days a week in poor conditions for only 20 cents an hour at a Vietnamese subcontractor. The report also stated that a living wage in Vietnam was at least $3 a day, an income that could not be achieved at a subcontractor without working substantial overtime. Nike and its subcontractor was not breaking any laws, but question was raised about ethics. It may have been legal, but was it ethical to use subcontractors who, by developed nation standards, clearly exploit the workforce? Consequently, Nike management established a code of conduct for its subcontractors and institute annual monitoring by independent auditors of all subcontractors. Next is human rights. Basic human rights still are not respected in large number of nations, and several historical and current examples exist to illustrate this point. Rights taken for granted in developing nations such as freedom of association, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of movement, and freedom from political repression, for example, are not universally accepted worldwide. One of the most obvious historic examples was South Africa during the day of white rule and apartheid, which did not end until 1994. This may seem a long time ago, but the effects of old systems still linger to this day. Now we're going to move to the environmental regulations. Ethical issues can arise when environmental regulations in a host nation are inferior to those in a home nation. Many developing nations have substantial regulations governing the emission of pollutants, the dumping of toxic chemicals, the use of toxic materials in the workplace, and so on. Those regulations are often lacking in developing nations, and according to critics, the result can be higher levels of pollution from the operation of multinationals than would be allowed at home. Finally is corruption. Corruption has been a problem in almost every society in history, and is continued to be one today. There always have been and always will be corrupted government officials. Many multinationals have adopted a zero-tolerance policy. For example, the large oil multinational BP has a zero-tolerance approach toward facilitating payments. Now, let's dig deeper into the roots of unethical behavior. Why do managers behave in an unethical manner? There's no simple answer to this question because the causes are complex. But some generalization can be made, and these issues are rooted in 6 determinants of ethical behavior: personal ethics, decision-making process, organizational culture, unrealistic performance goals, leadership, and societal culture. Personal ethics. Personal ethics are generally accepted principles of right and wrong governing the conduct of individuals. The personal ethical code that guides our behavior comes from a number of sources, including our parents, our schools, our religion, and the media. Decision-making processes. Several studies of unethical behavior in a business setting have concluded that business people sometimes do not realize they are behaving unethically, primarily because they simply fail to ask, is this decision or action ethical? Instead, they apply a straightforward business calculus to what they perceive to be a business decision, forgetting that decision may also have an important ethical dimension. Organizational culture refers to the values and norms shared among organization employees. Culture in some organizations does not encourage people to think through the ethical consequences of decisions. For example, paying bribes to secure business contracts was long viewed as an acceptable way of doing business within certain companies. Unrealistic performance goals. A fourth cause of unethical behavior is pressure from the parent company to meet unrealistic performance goals that can be attained only by cutting corners or acting in an unethical manner. In these cases, bribery may be viewed as a way to hit challenging performance goals. Leadership. Leaders have established the culture of an organization, and they set the example, rules, and guidelines that ought to follow, as well as the structure and processes for operating both strategically and in daily operations. Employees in a business often take their cue from business leaders, and if those leaders do not behave in an unethical manner, the employees may not either. Societal culture. The study found that enterprises headquartered in cultures where individualism and uncertainty avoidance are strong were more likely to emphasize the importance of behaving ethically than firms headquartered in cultures where masculinity and power distance are important cultural attributes. Such analysis suggests that enterprises headquartered in a country such as Russia would score high on masculinity and power distance measures, and where corruption is endemic, are more likely to engage in unethical behavior than enterprises headquartered in Scandinavia. Cultural relativism. Cultural relativism is the belief that ethics are culturally determined and that firms should adopt the ethics of the culture in which they operate. At its extreme, cultural relativism suggests that if a culture supports slavery, it is okay to use slave labor in the country. Righteous moralist. A righteous moralist claims that a multinational's home country standards of ethics are the appropriate ones for companies to follow in foreign countries. While this seems reasonable at first blush, the approach can create problems. Although there are some universal moral principles that should not be violated, it does not always follow that appropriate things to do is adopt home country standards. A naive moralist assert that if a manager from multinational sees that firm from other nation are not following ethical norms in a host nation, that manager should not either. A classic example to illustrate the approach is known as the drug law problem. An American manager in Colombia routinely pays off the local drug lord to guarantee that her plant will not be bombed and that none of her employees will be kidnapped. The manager argues that such payments are ethically defensible because everyone is doing it. Utilitarian approaches to ethics. As a philosophy for business ethics, it focuses attention on the need to weigh carefully all the social benefits and costs of a business action to pursue only those actions where benefit outweigh the cost. The best decisions, from a utilitarian perspective, are those that produce the greatest good for the greatest number of people. For example, an oil company considering drilling in the Alaskan wildlife preserve must weigh the economic benefits of increased oil production and the creation of jobs against the cost of environmental degradation in a fragile ecosystem. Rights theories. Rights theories recognize that human beings have fundamental rights and privileges that transcend national boundaries and cultures. Moral theorists argue that fundamental human rights form the basis for the moral compass that managers should navigate by when making decisions that have ethical component. Justice theories. Justice theories focus on attainment of a just distribution of economic goods and services. A just distribution is one that is considered fair and equitable. John Rawls argued that all economic goods and services should be distributed equally, except when an unequal distribution would work to everyone's advantage. That is all for this video. Thanks for watching.